Kino, and today I'm going to be covering Bram Stoker's Dracula. So welcome to the Kino Cave, and all throughout the month of October it is All Hallows Kino. All throughout the month, all horror shit, all month. It's gonna be fucking great. Just a little disclaimer for you guys. I am covering the book Dracula, not the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's for another time. I'm covering the book. I just finished the book recently and I really liked it, so I want to talk about it. Also, I know this is Nicolas Cage behind me, but he has nothing to do with this video other than the fact that he played Dracula once in a pretty fun movie. So, for any of you who don't know, the whole idea of the modern vampire, you know, the pale face, the sharp teeth, all that kind of stuff, pretty much originated in Bram Stoker's book Dracula. And of course the character Dracula also is originated in that book. There's vampire stuff before that. Vampires have existed in myth for quite a while. But, you know, think of a vampire in your head. The idea of that comes originally from Stoker's book. Me personally, I've always found vampires to be really interesting, quite scary. I loved the whole idea of them sucking your blood. I love the idea of them turning into bats. That is largely because of Batman as well, because I like Batman, but I also like vampires. I've always loved that kind of idea. Vampires, werewolves, pretty much anything where it bites you to turn you into one. And so, when I was kind of a teenager, I wanted to get into vampires and shit like that more, and especially monsters. And I stumbled across the old Universal horror classics. And among those, you know, Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, Dracula. So the Dracula movie that came out in 1931, which I'll talk about some other time, not right now. I really loved that movie. It was really interesting. Bela Lugosi is my favorite Dracula. I absolutely love the guy. He's also where the accent comes from, because the, you know, I am Dracula. That is Bela Lugosi's actual Hungarian accent. Again, I'm not talking about this movie today. Just a little fun fact. Anyway, that movie was an adaptation of the book. Sort of. It's an adaptation of a play, which was the adaptation of the book. The movie is like an hour and 10 minutes. The book is 400 pages long. There is a lot of the book that was not covered in that movie. And there's a lot of the book that isn't covered in Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which is a stupid title. And Coppola added a lot of stupid shit to that movie. I'm sorry, I said it. I like that movie. I don't love it because it adds shit that's not in the book and it's dumb. The book is really, really good. And the movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, follows the same story but adds in stupid stuff. So I bought the book, it sat on my shelf for a little bit, and then when I came to college last year, yes, it's taken me months to read this, I'm not a big reader, and it's a pretty dense book. But for college, I had to read it, or at least some of it, in order to do an essay on it. So I did. And I got really into it, and then I'd take a break for a couple of months and read other things because I cannot just focus on 400 straight pages. But I finally got around to finishing it quite recently, just in time for October, so I could do a video on it for you. So you get the idea. Had to read it, wanted to read it anyway, read it, loved it. I found it to be really engaging, quite easy to read, especially for a book from the 19th century. I found it really easy to read for a book from the 19th century. You know, it's quite easy to read. It takes a while to get into. You know, it's a book where you really do have to focus because of kind of the specific language used and the amount of, like, characters talking and explaining things to you, and then there's some chapters where very little happens and it's quite hard to get into it. But then there's chapters where a fuck ton happens and you really have to read carefully to get every little thing. But all in all, really great read. I don't know will I read it start to finish ever again, but I'll definitely pick the chapters that I like and reread those. So, I really love the opening 4 chapters, Jonathan Harker's diary, because by the way, this entire book is made up of diary entries from the various characters within. So the first 4 chapters covers Jonathan Harker's time in Castle Dracula in Transylvania. So this is where you get introduced to Jonathan Harker, sort of the hero of the book, or at least the male hero of the book. I'll get into characters later. And he's staying in Castle Dracula because he's doing a deal, because he's like a lawyer or whatever. And he meets Dracula, spooky shit starts happening. You get the idea. It's Dracula. And I found those chapters to be actually some of the most engaging in the book, which you could see as a bad thing. But I really, really liked it. I love those first 4 chapters. They could work as like a short story on their own, just those first 4 chapters. Really, really good stuff. I found it to be really engaging, really quite spooky, and just a lot happens in it that just makes you wince. I really liked Jonathan Harker's character as well. He's quite stoic at times, he's quite proud and stand up kind of guy, but he's also really emotional, especially towards the end, and like towards the kind of the middle to end of the book. He gets very, very emotional as well, which I think is interesting for a male hero of the time, because you don't expect them to kind of get emotional and break down and stuff, but he does. And I think that's really, really engaging, really, really endearing. Moving on from that then, we get a lot of stuff between Mina Murray and Lucy Westenra. They're like best friends in London, and Mina is engaged to Jonathan. I'm not going to go through the whole plot with you guys. Either look up the plot on Wikipedia or just read the fucking book. Point is, I love Mina and Lucy's relationship. They have a very sisterly relationship, or like best friend kind of relationship. It's really, really sweet and endearing. And then as things take a turn, when Dracula arrives in London, you really start to feel for them. And I quite like how, Lucy and Mina, they're like those 2 best friends where they're like total opposites, but it works because they're best friends and they kind of even each other out a bit. Because Mina's quite like reserved, she's engaged to be married, and she's responsible, I suppose. Whereas Lucy then is like pure party girl, pure kind of like just wants to have a good time, slightly irresponsible. But it works because, she's always with Mina, so Mina's able to draw her back a bit, and Lucy's able to draw Mina out a bit. I think Mina might be my favourite character in the book because she has such a great growth. Kind of throughout the book, she starts out to be quite helpless, quite emotional. She doesn't really know what's going on, she doesn't know what to do. But then as the situation gets more dire, and as she's forced into situations where she has to do more, she takes it on really, really well, and she shows that she's quite capable and really, really smart and really, really capable of fighting for herself, which I quite like. Especially towards the end, she's often shown to be actually quite stronger than Jonathan, her husband. Because, she marries Jonathan. That's a light spoiler, I guess. But she finds herself to be a lot less emotional than Jonathan, but a lot more brave and courageous than Jonathan. At the end of the day, yeah, the men have to go out and stop the bad guy, but she's always there. She always insists on being there. She always insists on doing her part. She never stops working to get Dracula, and I found that to be really, really cool, especially for a character from the 19th century. There's also some really great supporting characters in this book too, like Dr. Seward and Quincy Morris, and all these, supporting characters who are there to support. I said support too much. I found, weirdly enough, Dr. Seward almost seems to be the main character of the book, because he has nearly every chapter it's Dr. Seward's diary, and him talking about the situations in the book. And I found that to be kind of strange because I didn't love Dr. Seward as a character. He almost just feels like a narrator. And I really wanted to stick with characters like Mina, Jonathan, a little bit Van Helsing as well. So, I don't know, I found it strange, but I didn't mind it so much because Again, Dr. Seward, he seems to be more like a narrator, really, than anything else. Weirdly enough, a character I didn't expect to not like is Van Helsing. I liked him. He's very clearly the kind of wise one. He's the guy who knows everything. He's the guy, like, he's the Obi-Wan Kenobi, he's the Gandalf, he's the Dumbledore. He's the old man from, like, far away. He's the mentor figure. He's the guy who knows everything. I don't know, I think I just found him to be kind of mean. A bit rude. Well, he's not rude. He's quite supportive, but, like, there's just something about him that I just didn't like. So I was expecting, like, this badass who was gonna, like, come in and be like, alright, this is vampire shit we're doing right here. We gotta go. We gotta get ourselves some wolfbane. We gotta get ourselves some wooden stakes. We gotta cut this guy's head off. We gotta make a plan going. But I don't know, he spends a lot of the time just kind of dictating what they do, and often what they were doing I didn't like. Whereas, like, oh yeah, we gotta, like, start doing blood transfusions. Oh no, the blood has all disappeared the next day. Well, let's just keep doing blood transfusions for a while. And then it's like, oh, like, let's go, let's beat this Dracula. And he's like, wait, have patience. We do not get this Dracula yet. And I'm like, get the Dracula. You know where he is. You know where he's going. Go get him. Just wait until it's daytime and he's in his coffin, and then just go get him. You already did it before once. It's grand. I don't know. I found Van Helsing to be really just kind of strange. Again, I was expecting this badass that I would absolutely love, and I ended up just not really loving him, and kind of I was kind of glad when I got to read a chapter where he wasn't in it. A character that I really, really enjoyed in this book, and I wasn't sure about it, was Renfield, because he spends the entire book in the mental asylum, which is quite a bit different from subsequent adaptations, because the insanely popular Universal movie has Renfield to be the one who goes to Dracula's castle, and he has a lot of scenes then after that, and you attach a lot to him. And of course there was a movie released earlier this year called Renfield, which stars Nicholas Hoult as Renfield doing Renfield shit, and that was a lot of fun. That's a really fun movie. So I wasn't sure how I was going to handle Renfield in this book, because he spends the entire book in a mental asylum. But I found, especially towards the end, I started to pity him a lot, because there's moments where he has his break from his, like, trance of being under Dracula's sort of spell, and you just feel really terrible for him, because you can tell that he knows what's happening to him and that he wants to get out. Like, he doesn't want this to happen, but it's happening anyway, and he can't stop it, and everyone around him thinks he's insane. Okay, there might be a slight angle change, because I had to take out the battery and change it so that I could charge it. Shouldn't affect it too much. Of course, we can't forget about the Big Daddy main event of this book, the character, the titular Dracula. So, Dracula's not in the book that much. He's in it a lot in the first 4 chapters, which is again why I quite like him a lot. And then he kind of shows up once around the middle, and then he shows up at the end. But, in fairness, you see the effect that he has on people. So Dracula grows a lot as a presence. And you obviously know that he's doing these things to these people, like, sucking blood and draining women of their blood and all that kind of thing. So his presence is always felt. And I actually really, really liked that. Because it's kind of like, oh, this person woke up and they felt so drained and they're so pale, and you're like, oh, fuck, it's Dracula's doing that. Oh, how are they going to get out of this one? I really, really liked that. So yeah, I didn't mind that Dracula, the person, wasn't really in the book that much. And to be honest, how much would it have worked anyway if he was? I just really liked seeing the effect that he had on everyone around him. So my one real negative with this book is that it does start to drag a lot. There are entire chapters where it's just like, oh, these 2 people went for lunch and they talked about mundane things that no one really cares about, and it doesn't have much to do with the plot. And we're gonna go on about this for 20 pages. I feel like, some chapters were a bit like that, where it's kind of very little actually happens. And maybe, you know, I mean, fuck, who am I to critique Bram Stoker, this amazing author from the 19th century who wrote this incredibly influential book? But I'm just saying, Bram, book probably could have been 300 pages instead of 400, would have been a breezier read, you know? Do I come off as a dick saying this? My point is, the book got a bit long for me in places, and that kind of led to me putting it down and then leaving it for a month and then not reading it and then going back into it and then loving it again. Still, really, really love this book. Would absolutely recommend you read it. If you love Dracula, the character, it's nice to see his roots, his origins. So, I'm going to get into full spoilers for this book because why the fuck not? It's a pretty popular book anyway, and most adaptations don't cover a lot of what actually happens in the book. So, because of course you've seen Dracula and other stuff in Hotel Transylvania, in fucking Renfield, in the Coppola film, in these all these the Christopher Lee one, like all these adaptations of Dracula, you have to have seen at least one of them, but you don't. You could still go into this book pretty fresh, unless you've seen the Coppola one, because that does, you know, take the plot from the book. But I think you could still go into this and still be shocked by a few things that happen in it, because most adaptations of Dracula kind of brush over a lot of the stuff in this book. So, full spoilers from here on out. So I've said it a couple of times now, the first 4 chapters of this book are awesome. I love getting to know the character of Jonathan Harker. I love getting to know the character of Dracula before he just disappears from the novel and you have to kind of just see the effect that he has on people. I love the presence of Dracula being created, the tone being established, and it genuinely did creep me out a lot, which, I don't know, I find it weird, like, it's hard for books to really do that, I think, because, you know, theatre of the mind and all that. But yeah, this book really did creep me out, and it's, you know, really detailed descriptions of everything that was going on. All the stuff with Lucy Westenra was really riveting. When she was being drained by Dracula, being possessed by Dracula, the desperation when they have to start reviving her with blood transfusions and shit like that. And I really liked Lucy as a character anyway. She was kind of a fun, light-hearted character, and to have this happen to her was just really tragic and really, really sad. So I really found myself attaching to her character and just being glued to the page when we were seeing her go through this horrible experience. And of course then it's doubly tragic and terrifying when she comes back as the Bloofer lady and starts like kidnapping kids and stuff. Really, really horrible stuff. And then obviously the chapter, probably one of my favourite chapters as well, is when they have to kill her and, you know, let her soul pass on and all that kind of thing. So yeah, I found all of that stuff. There's kind of like a whole stretch of the book where it's like a good few chapters are focusing on that whole kind of journey from when Lucy starts being drained by Dracula up until her coming back as the Bloofer lady, and then the guys having to kill her. I found that to be really, really riveting. I found that especially towards the end, we really feel the impact that Dracula is having on the characters. Sort of Mina having these like wild like periods of just being depressed and trying to focus on the mission. Jonathan just breaking down crying at various intervals because his wife like is having this horrible thing happen to her. You also get descriptions like Jonathan Harker's hair goes from black to silver over the course of a few months, which is also just again establishing how Dracula is affecting these characters. Even if he's not directly interacting with them, he's still having an effect. I touched on this a little bit, but I love how Mina grows to be stronger throughout the book, especially through her experiences with Dracula and Dracula trying to do the same thing to her that he did to Lucy. Some of the language is outdated, and some of it's a very obvious allegory for sexual assault, which, you know, it's a good allegory and a really interesting one. And yeah, some of the language is outdated, especially when Mina starts kind of taking charge and taking it upon herself to do more in terms of finding and stopping Dracula. Some of the language is a bit outdated. I'm not going to repeat it because I just don't want that soundbite existing on the internet. But the point is, she's doing really well and she's being commended for it by the men. I obviously loved the first 4 chapters with Jonathan Harker's journal, but I also quite like Jonathan Harker's journals in the later part of the novel. He kind of has a lot at the start and a lot at the end, and nothing in the middle, which is fine. But I really enjoyed his chapters later on as well, because you feel his depression and sadness at what's happening and just the stress that he's going through, because he has to allow this stuff to happen to his wife while they try and figure out a way to stop Dracula. And I especially found the note that he leaves after the 7 years after the events of the book, when everything kind of turns out okay, and it's just such a relief to see that these people have a good and regular life after that. The final few kind of chapters and pages, as well as they go to find Dracula and kill him, it was just really fast paced, really riveting. I finished it in a couple of days, like the last kind of 4 chapters or so, because it's just go, go, go. Like, we gotta find Dracula, we gotta stop him, we gotta kill him. And it was really, really awesome, really, kind of cool, really, really awesome stuff. Again, parts of it are outdated, but you gotta consider it with the time and everything as well. I found Quincy Morris's death to be really shocking. I genuinely didn't think that was going to happen, but I really, really liked it. Really, really sweet. I love how he's done so much for Mina and for Lucy as well, and that he got to kind of die proud of what he did. So it was really, really sweet that he got to go out on a high. And again, I was shocked. I genuinely didn't think that any of them were going to die, actually. So my final few thoughts on this book. I really, really liked it. I love it, in fact. I love the story of it. I love Dracula as a character even more now. And I get to understand the adaptations of it a bit more as well, which I quite like. Reading it again, I would read significant chapters to me, like the stuff about Lucy and when she becomes the Bloofer Lady. The first 4 chapters, obviously. Some of the chapters towards the end, like when they go to confront Dracula a couple of times, and at the end, like especially the last chapter. But I'd probably skip over some of the stuff in the middle where it's like, oh, Lucy and Mina went for lunch and they talked to some old man, and the old man was talking in this very weird old urban English that was difficult to read. So yeah, I might skip over some of that because it wasn't that important to the story, and it wasn't very interesting either. But those chapters are few and far between. Like, there's 28 chapters 27 or 28 chapters in the book. I can't remember how many. I think it's 27. There's that many chapters in the book, and I'd say at least 20 of them are very engaging and very relevant. So that being said, I am still on the All Hallows Kino run through October. A lot of interesting and cool videos coming your guys' way. Can't wait to get them done and get them out to you guys. It's going to be an absolute blast. With that being said, subscribe to see more videos covering all things horror throughout the month. How much talking out of my ass can I do in this video?